We'll see. All right, here we go. We're live. All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson yesterday, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor, and
Here.
Rich Purtell today.
The
Hey,
man, the
Rich.
myth, the legend, Rich Purtell. Guys, this guy's expert on all sorts of legislative stuff. He's an expert on what's that stupid act, the Jones Act. We did that. He got us a show with Colin Graybo. It was good stuff, Rich. You're doing good work.
Yeah, folks who follow Tim probably seen him before. I think he might, Rich. I think he might have been on a Free Solution like a while ago, like a pre-recorded episode with Tim. But so we're glad to have Rich here. We're gonna go into the radio show in just a minute. And we'll do the introductions again. So if you have any questions for Rich, make sure you put them in the comment section, and he's going to talk about legislation in New York. But we're going to go live or in the radio show in.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson yesterday, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Hey, I'm here. And Rich Purtell, Kevin, has blessed us with his presence, and he's going to share some of his expertise. And guys, it's good stuff. We appreciate it. How you doing, Rich?
Good. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being on, Rich. So tell you're involved with the Libertarian Party in New York. We brought you on to talk about legislation that you're watching in New York State. So tell us, what are you doing with the Libertarian Party, and then we'll jump into some of the legislative stuff. Talk about what's going on.
Yeah. First, just a quick summary of where we were and where we've gone. Legislative affairs. We used to just have one committee, and we've restructured now with our division structure to make this a division. And what that means is that I'm division director instead of chair of one committee. And our goal is to get multiple issues-based committees with chairs for each committee to drive legislation in certain areas. I mean, let's face it, Libertarian Party doesn't have a lot of political power. We have to do what we can. We can't tip the scale on a bill that's 70% one way and 30 the other. We're sure as heck not going to have enough power to flip that. If it's 55-45, if we work really hard, maybe we can flip it. If it's 52-48, yeah, we got a lot better chance of flipping something like that. If it's 52-48 the wrong way, maybe we can turn it around, So but the hope with division, being a division and having separate committees is that we can, get a little more accomplished with more people in different areas of expertise.
Well, that sounds pretty interesting. What like right now? What is your focus as what is the biggest piece of legislation out there that is just a nightmare for New York State? Because I know they're there, man. I know it.
Well, something we've talked about before, Tim, is surplus proceeds theft. And this is where having a specialist helps. So we've got Jonathan Larkey, who lives out in the Elmira area in Chemung County. He's active in the New York State Association of Realtors. He was just in Albany a couple weeks ago. So he's got the ear of people in Albany and the ear of people in real estate in New York. So he's bringing attention to this problem we've heard for a while. And there's actually a bill A786, which coming from the state would require municipalities to give notice, 2 weeks notice to people before a tax foreclosure, and identify to them that they have the right to get back any excess proceeds after a tax foreclosure auction. There's a disgusting practice in some counties in New York State that the municipalities keep any and all so-called surplus proceeds beyond what a property sells for at auction. In some cases, properties could sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars when just maybe $10,000 or $20,000 of back taxes are owed, and the county, or excuse me, the county treasurer keeps all the money, and typically most of it goes to the municipality. But it's really the county treasurers that should be called out on this to say this is a very disgraceful practice. You'll even see it in some county budgets where they expect to get a net revenue, net gain from tax foreclosures, and it's
Yeah.
because of this practice. So
I was going to say they to put it in the worst possible terms, they balance their budgets off of the backs of unfortunate taxpayers in your state, and it's reprehensible, man. Like
yeah,
it makes me sick to my stomach.
I call it cannibalistic. I mean, you're just eating your own people. It's just like, if you look at the cause of foreclosure, I think, the deadbeat people think, oh, a lot of people that don't pay their taxes are deadbeats. That paradigm sometimes is true, but very often what puts people in trouble is some type of medical crisis. They're sick. They got buried in bills, and they're sick, so they're probably not in a good state of mind to be able to pay all those bills, and the tax bill is just one more. And then the government's required to go through all these flaming hoots of procedures and timings and so on, and the people can get buried in the paperwork and end up in default. And yeah, it's just oftentimes it's just through no fault of their own. They're dragged down, and we don't need to beat on them no more with a club. They're already down and out. If they lose
And
their
then,
home, at least give them back the excess value and equity in their home, so they can, if their health improves, they can move on and maybe buy a new home and just get their life back together again. Or let's say they do pass on. Sometimes that happens. At least their heirs can obtain that equity rather than the government taking it.
Yeah,
it's
and actually, I want to relate this back to Rochester quick, because this happened in my neighborhood. Right, there's a tax foreclosure. The guy owed like $33,000, but the homes in my neighborhood now are going for well over that. Right, they're especially like a year or so ago, they were going for $120,000. And this guy was so distraught that his home was being sold in a tax auction that he decided to kill himself in a rather dramatic fashion. He blew up his house, which caused damage to the neighbor's house and everything too. And he didn't like realize that there could or ought to be any like proceeds from that auction that would go to him that would help him at least be able to rebuild his life too. It's so in a situation like that too, where either the county's going to take it or the person doesn't understand what rights they have in that situation, like it ended up like a really awful situation. And this person had just gone through like a series of crises that made money a major issue in his life and didn't unfortunately see any other way out. So this is something that happened again right down the road from me. And yeah, so this is an important bill, and if counties are just taking the proceeds of this, they're taking away people's home, the property that they may have already poured in hundreds of thousands of dollars into. It ain't right.
Yeah, it's just not right. Yep.
Yeah. Let me
I've
ask you a
even
question.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Rich. So one of the things I'm confused about, where I'm hearing, like, it kind of sounds like you're saying people may be entitled to the excess proceeds on a tax sale. They just have to go after it, or what's the situation there? Do you know if it's strictly legislated already, or do we need to work on that too?
Yeah, I think baby steps. I think that it should be automatic, right? If you have surplus equity, why do you have to file to get your own money back? But this is a baby
Exactly.
step legislation to say you get notice, you have a right to pursue it. The 14 days notice, so at least make it people more aware of it. But yeah, it ought to be automatic. If you have excess equity after the sale, the tax foreclosure sale of the home, why should I have to file to get my own money? I mean, it should come back to the person. I mean, like I say, they're already in a stressful situation. Why bury them in a paperwork requirement? Give them their doggone money back and let them get on with their life. But at least this legislation makes it more obvious. And I think in past, Tim, we've talked about this down in Long Island. I've heard cases where it seems very aggressive. What they're doing is they're going after homeowners who have fully paid off their mortgage, which means there's no bank in the mix to argue on their behalf. Because if the bank still has interest in a property, they're going to want to make sure they're not screwed over. So they have, full-time attorneys. But apparently in Long Island, some of the areas down there, they go after people that have paid off their mortgage and are more vulnerable. Again, maybe sick, maybe don't have a job. They're targeting people that look like they could be stolen from, in tax foreclosure. It's
Well, Rich,
it's
let's be
disgraceful.
sympathetic to the government. The government needs to balance its budgets, and they need to do so aggressively. Like, people don't really matter. It's for the good of the community, right? Like, that the government gets this money and puts it in its coffers. Not only that, but if someone has unpopular political views, the government should be able to financially ruin their lives and take their property. Right, Robert Forrest? Our friend Robert
You're right on
Forrest
the
is
cue.
out there.
Unpopular political views. You must have saw his name and jumped on that slogan, huh? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's corrupt, guys. Like,
Yeah.
technically it's legal, but it's corrupt. And so Rich is a guy that's actually being proactive and trying to fix this stuff. I appreciate that effort. So that's number one, excess proceed test. You got number two for us?
What else?
Yeah, so chair of the energy committee is Jim Dayton, who lives in the Rochester area. And one silly thing we're hearing about in New York is this pursuit of banning natural gas for new construction. And it's a big can of worms. We don't have a specific bill right now, but just we're trying to argue about the concept. And I think give credit to Brenda Hansen of Cattaraugus County for the constitutional county movement. She's a assistant director to PMA or something like that. She puts out lots of email lists. I recommend people sign up for her email list. She's always got very good, thoughtful commentary. But her pushback is to say, look, this is going to be a paper tiger law if local code enforcement officials don't enforce it. So what we should be arguing for now is to get these code enforcement officials to speak up and say, look, it's not practical in my community to ban natural gas for new construction. We don't have the substations, the wire, the transformers, the street buried wiring to convert upstate New York, a cold climate, even using high efficiency heat pumps. You're talking a lot more electric demand, to heat when it's 10 below zero. If all these housing developments now have to be built with the electricity instead of gas. And it's funny, I said I had a funeral tomorrow for my aunt. I had a cousin who stopped here who lives in Ohio, and he was a home builder, just retired recently. And we were chatting about it. These housing developments take 5-10 years to build out, and they start 100 unit development. They might build 5 or 10 units a year. How are you going to do that? They're already planned for gas, and they've got gas mains laid in the ground and prepared. They don't have enough ampacity to cover it all with power. How do you change that midstream to go from 10 units are now gas, and now the next 90 are going to be electric? You're imposing a huge cost on them if they got to switch gears all of a sudden. Let alone the shortage we're going to see in transformers and substations and transmission lines, and someone's going to have to pay for all that. So
So I think they would respond, but what about the cost imposed on all of us by global warming? Isn't it like time that we tackled this issue now? Shouldn't we tackle the use of natural gas and convert to more cleaner and more efficient sources of energy that in theory could be powering our grids?
Yeah, and we should. I have 10 kilowatts of solar panels on my own roof, so I'm taking action myself. I think people should take individual action, but I don't think we should paint ourselves in a corner too with some of these ideas, some of these regulations.
Being that I'm active in the solar industry, I'm still skeptical of our approach to handling global warming. I do think solar energy is interesting and effective. So I don't know. I just wanted to say no to what you were asking. Like, should we plan for global warming? I think we like our investment strategy. Let's say the sea level goes up a couple feet. There's some very attractive land that if like the beachfront moves back a little bit, we can make a lot of money. That's all I'm saying.
Tim's like, I'm buying the property like 3 miles from the beach because that's thinking ahead. That's
long game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical, but yeah, like, why ban anything? Let's have some free market competition. Let's talk about what things are right, what things are just. And look, guys, the government's paid off big oil lots of times. Like, they could pay off like progression in the electric industry as well. But like, Rich, I'll be honest with you, you spoke to a subject there that I'm very familiar with, and that's shortages of big electrical switches and transformers. They take months and months to come in now for projects that have been planned for years. To rush that even more than it already is going to create huge problems. People are going to be without heat in the winter.
Yeah, and specifically, I want to address like this issue, like in Rochester. That I shared I retweeted something a couple weeks ago now, where I shared it for you guys in the private chat if you want to check it out. But it was saying like the town of Penfield, like power supply, which is solar, was off 98.6% of the time, right? And so Tim, like maybe I'm not understanding like what that means, but that doesn't seem good to me. that like especially in the middle of winter, if we're transitioning to a system that's going to be more reliant on that. And that's specifically what the city of Rochester is trying to do. They're trying to get everyone, you have to opt out of having all of your power coming from solar in Rochester, which if you didn't opt out, your power bill went way up instead of just way up a little bit. uh, and so, but we're having problems. We're seeing some of the problems with this in Monarch County again. And I don't think like any three of us are against solar power generally. It's just having a mix of power and understanding the environment that we live in and the like the unique situation of living in a cloudy area with variable weather and high demands requires having a different mix of power sources than just
For
solar.
sure.
So
And look, heat is an incredibly, like, to generate heat from electric is incredibly electric intensive. You have to use a lot of electric to generate heat. It does great with lights and everything like that, but there's a reality here that we have to face. Like, electric buses are scary in upstate New York, right? Like, you're sending your kids on a bus that's electric. There's a chance it's going to fail on really cold days, like a much greater chance than a diesel bus.
Yep. Another thing on the radar is, and I just heard about this issue just a few weeks ago, is the right of first refusal. And that's where utilities have the right to reject competitive options for building of transmission lines. So Texas has been doing this because Texas is trying to maintain independence. That's their excuse. But in New York, I think it's because the utilities and probably more importantly, their union employees have a lot of political leverage. So they're adopting right of first refusal legislation so that the utilities can veto national, international transmission installation companies that have the expertise to build these, behemoth towers and transmission lines. So they're limiting competition. It's basically another form of corporate welfare. So if we have a shortage of transmission lines, is it smart now to say, oh, okay, Mr. Utility, you can veto all these competing options from foreign companies, that have expertise in that area, or companies elsewhere in the United States that have expertise, in order to give favoritism to New York utilities and unions. So that's on the radar, and another, that's probably even more of a threat, an immediate threat, than the natural gas prohibition. I mean, it's already been acted upon by the Public Service Commission and the independent system operator.
I mean, if I was selling access to those rules and regulations, then yes, I would benefit from that as a politician. But that's the only person that's going to benefit from that situation is getting my campaign coffers filled by offering that right of refusal.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to do a bit more research in that. There's kind of it's a left wing movement in Rochester, but there's we have essentially a monopoly on the utilities in the Rochester area, unless you live in Fairport, which is a public utility. But you have Rochester Gas and Electric, right? Like pretty much the whole area. That is what it is. There's a push by a left wing group that wants to make it a public utility instead. And I'm curious how like that sort of legislative push is going to like impact like those sort of things. And I have mixed feelings about it because at one part, like I don't really want a public utility. I don't think they're going to manage it any better. But on the other hand, they do have a monopoly, and their responsiveness to people's frustrations with their service is not great. It's not a stellar record because there's no real competition there because they're the ones who maintain the lines. And the argument goes that it's a natural monopoly anyway. Why would you want to have competing lines? Why would you want to have competing like ways of delivering power anyway? So Rich, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just one thing that comes to mind, and I didn't fact check this, but I heard from one person, I believe, in maybe Endicott Municipal Electric. So some of the municipal electrics in New York would have to change the rules because have a long-standing practice of not allowing electric heat for new construction. So they're just the opposite. Because they're limited in what they can do and their resources, they've had a practice of saying, if you build a house, you cannot use electric heat. Not that you cannot use gas, but you cannot use electric. So you're asking for them to do a 180 and prohibit the gas instead of the electric. So, and I haven't fact checked this, but I heard this, apparently some of the municipal power companies in New York prohibit electric heat. But it kind of makes sense. I mean, if they have limited resources and wire and talent, then why would they want houses to be built with electric heat? They're gonna eat up a lot more power, and then the local municipality, which doesn't have the gigantic resources of a NYSEG or an RG&E. If there's problems, they want smaller wires and less things to deal with than if they're a lot of their customers are all electric heat. So even the power's cheap, they don't want you using it
Something
for
about this is
heat.
ringing a bell. Like I think you might be right, and I'm trying to think, but I don't think it's NYSEG. But I do think it's well, it doesn't matter which one it is, but I do think that there are prescriptions in certain areas against heating with electric, and that they're going to have to change their rules. But how do they change their rules if they're saying you can't have electric because the grid that we're offering is already maxed out? How do they change their rules? Like, where are they going to get more power without nuclear power plants? I don't know that it's realistic.
Well, 35 years ago, when NYSEG was doing off-peak electric storage, promoting that with rebates, and other utilities were promoting that in New York State, I constantly heard NYSEG preaching, the NYSEG sales reps preaching that we're a winter peaking utility, we're a winter peaking utility, we're a winter peaking utility. You hear that from the upstate utilities. So they're already winter peaking. You're going to put more load on in the winter, so they're going to peak even more in the winter and need even more infrastructure to cover their winter load. That's why this thing with downstate summer peaking. So the penalty to them to shift to electric heating really isn't that significant, because you don't have to upsize all their wires and substations and transmission lines to cover heat in winter, because they're already sized for air conditioning of commercial buildings in the summer. So they're not going to feel the pain and suffering that we're going to feel upstate.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we have to head the break now, though. So Rich, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to head the break here on WYSL. We'll be back on A Free Solution in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. And we're out. Went over like 30 seconds. We'll be all right.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys. I'm going to head out. I got to keep
joining us,
packing.
Rich.
So, we're going to talk about another bill, like Kevin, that affects Kevin directly, and independent contractors. If you want to hang out for a bit.
I better get up and help pack. So
you got to pack. Right. Hey, well,
thanks so
Rich,
much.
So glad you could be here.
Thanks for having me on. Have a good evening.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, Rich.
Bye.
All right. And so for those of you who are watching us online, thank you for joining us on this unusual Thursday evening recording. So what we're doing is we're the producer at WYSL is going to be out next week, so I need to give him a show by tomorrow for next week's show. So doing this one a little bit early. That's why we're doing this.
That doesn't mean we're not going to do a show next week, Kevin, does it?
Well, we'll see.
People want
we don't. Yeah, we don't have to do a show for the radio, but we could do a show just because we want to do a show.
And then I could swear more.
You could. At least I wouldn't have to edit those out. Gotta edit all those shows. But you want to talk about this comment quick, Brian? Is we need more electric co-ops?
It's interesting, right? Because NYSEG makes rules about solar energy. Like, they won't buy back solar energy. Let's say you efficiently install a solar generation operation on your property. NYSEG, without pre-approval and prior planning, they don't let your meter spin backwards, and they don't let you
right. You got to apply for it in a lot of places, right?
Right.
NYSEG's one of them.
But interestingly enough, co-ops will, even though maybe they don't pay a good market rate, will in fact buy your excess power and will allow your power to be returned to the grid in a way that benefits you. So on some level, it would be a good idea to have more electric co-ops.
Yeah, listen, I got mixed up. Like the people who have, at least last I spoke with folks who have like Fairport Electric, they're pretty happy with it. It's one of those things where like normally I would be like, of course I don't want the government involved in any way with like this thing, but effectively when the private companies are running it, they have a monopoly. They're given all this state protection anyway.
Oh, they are.
So like in like Rochester specifically, like, okay, RG&E is part of a big international conglomerate, like just a small piece of that. Maybe you get some like efficiencies by like being able to source talent when there's issues from like their entire network. But also like they're sending a bunch of money, out internationally too. Like, okay, like, is that great? Like, would Rochester do better? Would it look out for the interests of the city better? Would it be less expensive? Maybe. or it could be a total boondoggle.
Yeah.
I don't totally trust the city of Rochester government to like be effective all the time. Like county
No,
government, mixed record, like the water's really clean, but it was like kind of infamously corrupt for a bit.
yeah, that is, my feelings on the government running anything, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Until we can get until I can get my small modular reactor in my backyard, we're gonna have to deal with this.
Kevin,
John's got it. We need more nuclear. There, I fixed it.
Yeah, look, I've got to tell you, out of an abundance of curiosity, I actually kind of did some research about building small nuclear reactors and making electric with them.
And now you're on a list.
Well, I may be on a list, but it's also it's feasible. Like you could go to YouTube, man, and build a nuclear reactor, like a small one, that may not generate massive amounts of power, but the possibility exists for a homegrown.
You don't need massive amounts of power. You need to power your house. And then if you live in a place where you can, feed it back to the grid and make your meter run backwards, then even better.
What I'm saying. That would be sweet. I do have an idea to put a couple windmills at my house. Solar is not feasible, but I might try to squeeze a cute little windmill on there and see if I can generate some DC electric to keep everything I'm getting now. It runs on batteries, right? Even my vacuum, So if I can just keep those batteries charged for free, I could charge all my cell phones. I mean, I'm proficient with wiring, so I could kind of wire up an area where it's convenient to do all of these things and make everything look good. So I don't know. I'm kind of messing with that. A couple $100 for a windmill, and boom.
That'd be cool. I've thought about it, but that would be definitely struck down in a zoning meeting if I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put like a tower up in my yard in the city, even though I've got like a nice open park next to me, so like the wind is always just like blasting the side of my house.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it'd be perfect for that, but like, no, there's no way. Like, I don't have like 50 grand to like fight fight the zoning board about it.
It's funny because in this time of year, if it's like slow in the contracting business, my brain always goes into overdrive about new ideas, right? So basically, I just hit up the internet one day about generating my own electric power, and like I said, at my house, I'm on the north side of a hill, so the hill goes up towards the south. That makes solar pretty unfeasible, really. But because I live next to a lake and I live on the west side, the east side of the lake, the wind comes across the lake, compresses against my bank, which is up, and it just blows it in my yard, like high speed all the time, even on slightly windy days, because there's a compression factor going on. So I don't know. We get a little windmill.
Yeah, maybe you get there's a name for it, like basically a wind funnel too, like vortex to.
Yeah.
There you go.
They got them that spin in circles, not so you don't really have to worry about the direction of the wind. It just spins like this, making me power and money.
There you go. Hey, that's the thought.
Pennies at a time.
We should get back to the regular show eventually. So we'll go back in a few seconds, and then we're gonna talk about the freelancer stuff. And if any other folks have stuff they want to talk about too, make sure you leave them in the comments as well. We'll get to those. And I see, Patricia, it takes 4 to 5 years the solar electric system pay for itself. Maybe it depends on what you're getting and how you're getting it, but could be worth it. We're not anti-solar.
Yeah.
Cool. And all right, so we're gonna be back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Yeah, and Kevin, I just want to say freelance isn't free, bro. Like here's a certain reality that the New York State government, and we got on a legislative kick thanks to Rich, but there's a freelance bill that's Kevin. I don't know why people aren't more excited about this. It is just aims to protect you freelancers out there who don't necessarily fit the system. They want to make sure you get fairly treated by your employer.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm fairly treated. All right. Yeah. So like they know what's best for me and what I want in my life. All right. So like this kind of been hanging around a while. Like Biden like kind of mentioned it and referenced it in the State of the Union again. It's called the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which does a bunch of things like including like mess with like right to work stuff. And one of the big things it does kind of mess with like freelancers too. I've talked a bit about this before, but now it's even more personal to me because I'm a freelancer right now. Like I for those of you who don't know that, I lost my job like about a month ago. And I've been doing freelance and I've been enjoying it. It's been fun. I picked up a few contracts and like I like the flexibility of doing that. So I could take another full-time job. I got some offers coming in, but like I don't know, I kind of like the freelance thing. And so I might just do that because I like being able to set my own hours and adjust my time and go after projects where I can, make a little bit more money. And, if I eventually I'm going to build up enough projects, hopefully, like where I can start to charge a higher rate, that's what I want to be able to do. I might also want to like hire some freelancers of my own to be able to grow my opportunities and just like build and bigger and better services for the clients that I have. And this bill might mess with that.
The government wants to protect you from such a risky exchange, a risky exchange of your time for a service and for money like that. They want to protect you, Kevin. I don't understand why you don't.
Sure, they do. So all right, we'll explain what the government thinks it's doing here. Right? What they think they're doing here is they think that like I'm in a relationship with like, let's say like an agency, right? Like this, which I'll sometimes contract my services out to. And they think that relationship, I want to have an employer-employee relationship with them. That's what I want. That's what the goal is. And that the employer wants to not have that so that they can avoid paying me benefits and other, amenities that come with being an employee. So that's the assumption that like
Right.
I would want that. And they'll a lot of times they'll talk about like Uber and Lyft drivers and like Grubhub folks and stuff like that who will work like 35 hours a week. And they're like, well, if you're working a full-time job, then you might as well, be an employee, and then you should have the right to organize and the right to unionize. And if you're a contractor, it's hard to do that type of stuff. And so we're going to impose these protections on you. If you like, there's certain states that have like a strict set of criteria to define what is a contractor versus an employee. California being one of them. Like it's things like if you're doing something and it's effectively full time and you have to be in a physical place or in a meeting at certain times, if you weren't doing this as a business prior to that relationship, and what's the other one? And if it's not something that they already have other employees for. So if they have an employee for that same function and then they hire you as a contractor, the state of California would view that as an illegitimate relationship, and it opens up the employer to liability.
New York has similar regulations, Kevin, just so you know. As you probably know, I was an independent contractor for decades, okay? And what I found was there were other guys out there, other businessmen that would hire kids, pay them cash, and tell them that they were independent contractors, make them buy a liability policy, right? And then those kids would invariably not pay their Social Security tax, right? They would invariably not pay that. And eventually the government would catch up with that kid. That kid would then say, I think I was an employee, so I don't know what you're talking about. Or the kid would be on the hook for multiple thousands of dollars. So there is an argument like that there is a certain level of dishonesty in certain businesses that where young people get taken advantage of. But in your case, that's completely not the situation.
Yeah.
And frankly,
no, 100%. And I'm not denying that doesn't happen, that there aren't relationships where like it's either unclear or unknown, or like really they should just they're treating this person like an employee and having expectations like an employee. And and like I said, with young people who like they don't realize that they need to like set aside a portion of their money to pay taxes with it, and again, I've been in this situation a couple times now, I know, but like it's always you gotta take out a chunk of your income for that, and then you gotta write a check quarterly to the IRS, which I think you and I were talking after last week's show, and we're like, man, if everyone had to do that, if everyone had to write that check once a quarter, a lot of folks feel differently about taxes, but but for most people who are just employed, it's getting taken out in payroll taxes. Like you see some of the stuff getting taken out. That's not the full thing. If you're self-employed, it's a whole different tax that you got to pay. And so you have to set that stuff aside. Uh,
Yeah, you have to
and
plan this out, and then taxes become very real to you, right?
oh
Like
yeah,
you're as a contractor, an independent contractor, if you don't pay your taxes, you literally like they will threaten to take your everything. They'll be like, "We're going to seize your account." I ran into an experience where I was filing payroll taxes under the wrong ID number for actually for about 2 years, right? So all of a sudden, the IRS starts sending me these letters like, "You haven't been paying your payroll taxes," and I'm like, I look, it gets taken out automatically. I don't know what you're talking about. They sent me letters. They're like going to take my car. They're going to take my house. They're going to seize all my assets. They're going to start proceedings next week if I didn't get this straightened out. It's absolutely terrifying. So, anyways,
yeah,
it all worked out, but taxes become very real. Like the way piecemeal they get taken out of people's taxes, people just say, "All right, I made $500 this week. That's it." It's not when you have to pay those bills out of your pocket. We would all have a better grasp of taxation.
yeah. Now, when you're writing the check, yeah, I might be in favor of that. I might be in favor of like we shouldn't be withholding the taxes in the paycheck. You gotta write that check. You can mail it in, or you can pay it online, but you gotta pay that, and then
Everybody would be like, "And the Fed, and the IRS." They would just be
yeah,
awesome. The Libertarian Party would win elections nationally, Kevin.
that's right.
Period.
That's how we win. We get that bill passed. So, uh, Rich, if you're listening, work on that. No,
Yeah.
just get everyone together. Like I know it's a federal thing, but like get everyone together. Let's work on that one. Um,
Yeah. So that for a kid to get off the hook, all he had it out of these taxes, right? All he's got to do is say, he told me to be at a certain place at a certain time. And then that opens up the whole can of worms.
mhm.
You're saying you you reject all of that. You want the flexibility. You're not at any place at a certain time. That to me is a better way of life. I was basically an independent contractor for the first, I don't know, 40, 50% of my career as a contractor. So I get it, but I wonder if everybody does. And I certainly want people to be able to live a
No.
little bit freer of a life, make their own hours, and do what they want, right?
Yeah, and look, it's not for everybody, and I don't even know if I'm gonna stick with it like for that long or forever. I might, a good job offer might come along, I might take it. I don't know, right? But like, it's nice if I want to wake up a little bit later or go meet someone out for breakfast, and then like after this, if I wanted to go like work on some of the stuff I needed to get done per my contract, I could do that. Like I can work whatever hour that I want to work. I'm held to like milestones of accountability related to client deliverables rather than like being in a physical place or in front of a computer at a set of times.
And you have one boss, and that's your customer, and that's it. And
Yeah.
if you don't like your boss customer, you find a different boss customer. It's very, very,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah. And it's a little bit less of a transition than finding a whole new job. It's like, all right,
It
well, I
is.
gotta go pick up a new contract for like this much to make what I want. Okay, I'll go out and look for
Yeah.
that. And then,
It
that's
really is. It is a very freedom oriented mindset that you get to live with. So that was how I lived my life for a long number of years, and I enjoyed it. I kind of am reminiscing about it, considering what I may or may not do in the future myself. So
yeah.
you know,
No,
um,
so and
taxation is theft, Kevin.
taxation is theft, Alice on YouTube. Taxation is theft from our government. Yeah. Feels like that. I mean, I would go with extortion, but yeah, I think
It's
I'm.
extortion, coercion, and elements of theft.
Yeah,
Um,
and John says then you could homeschool your son, Kevin. Maybe,
it
you know.
does. I'm telling you, it does offer you. You can coach a kid's sport, right? You can
Yeah,
maybe join a golf league, right? Whereas a job may demand that you aren't able to participate in those things, right? If kids need to be coached at 4 o'clock and your job says you've got to work till 5,
right.
you're not coaching any kids ever, So
Yeah,
it,
it's
it
just it's not an option. So like there's some flexibility in it. There's risk too, but that's kind of the state of freedom too, right? Like there's flexibility, there's opportunity, and there's also risk. Like it could blow up my face. I could stink at this.
you could.
Incidentally, if anyone needs any digital marketing services,
I
no,
think that's a good idea. Like we
I
should
probably should sponsor the
flirt.
show of my company, but
Yeah.
that's
There's a great quote out there from Brian Sutton. Um, America's abundance was created not by public sacrifices to the common good, but by the productive genius of free men. And that's a quote from I Atlas Shrugged. Ayn Rand is behind it.
Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I love Atlas Shrugged. I loved it. It was a good book. I don't even read the whole thing, but the premises were good. It was solid, and then I got bored. I don't know. I have attention deficit disorder.
No, well, I'll say this. This is the bad mouth that genre too much. But Ayn Rand, like, she is trying to make like a specific point, and then sometimes like that point ends up overtaking like the story that is meant to, like, be the foundation for that point.
Yeah,
So
no,
she's more concerned about making the point than telling a good story.
but there were parts of the story that was good. So,
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that's probably why I didn't finish the book. I'll be honest with you.
That's part of it. It's an interesting point. Just like she often sacrifice story for ideology.
Which is great. We need more writers like her.
But yeah, usually you get that on the left, right? Like, you see that in a lot of TV shows nowadays where it's like, I don't really have a problem with the point you're making. It's more that, like, you forgot about telling the story. And that's
And you keep hitting me in the face with the point you're making, like over and over and over again. It's like, could we just get back to the story? Like there was something interesting. That's why I'm watching this. And now you're just saying social justice this, social justice that, or whatever your point is.
Too on the nose. So
Yeah.
I know we're just like vaguely talking about those, but so we got like minute and a half, 2 minutes left. We should wrap up the point about the freelancer stuff. So follow that bill. It passed in the House a while ago, and I don't know if it'll end up getting through the Senate or not. But it's something I'm watching closely because there's a populist wave even amongst Republicans who want to do things. They say they want to, like, help workers and be on the side of workers, and they get caught up in the same populist fervor that, like, the Democrats are caught up in, and it may end up impacting the ability of someone like me to make a living. So
yeah. And just so you know, there's also a specific bill literally called "Freelance Isn't Free" without the bro part in New York State. So this is also a New York State issue. They have a specific bill in New York State. So,
yeah, and and then there's other interesting stuff that's going on in the other direction too. Like folks who are trying to make it easier to make benefits portable. Like Utah's working on something like that. There's some federal legislation to work on that, and that stuff would be helpful too, right? Like if you're like I get health insurance through my wife, but like other folks, like that ends up being the big challenge to being a freelancer, is that most of health insurance is tied to employers nowadays, and it's hard to, like, take that plan that you like and keep it. It's very expensive to do so. There are certain ways you can do it, but dismantling that system and allowing for more flexibility and movement of the relationships between employers, employees, and freelancers and all that stuff, and letting people figure it out on their own, we're going to end up with a better, more effective, and wealthier system by doing that.
Powerful government, though, but it doesn't stand a chance.
Wow. That's powerful. Yeah. Then the government can't get involved, and well, gosh, guess we're going to have to make everyone's lives worse because, well, think of the government.
We've got to fund the government.
All right. So we're running out of time for this segment. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We have one more segment left. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. Well.
All right.
Watch the three movies. I watched the first two. I never saw the third one.
All right. Are they on Netflix?
Oh, they might. They were for a bit.
Okay.
And I never finished reading the book. I got to be honest. I couldn't do it either. I got the Fountainhead on my shelf too. Atlas Shrugged. The only one I've been able to finish was Anthem. Because it's like 60 pages.
Well, I'll have to try that one.
Yeah,
I did. I thought about. Yeah. I mean, is it on my shelf here? It is. I got it up there in the back, just because it's Libertarian Creed, but it is also kind of a boring book when I got right down to it. But the philosophy was good, and the points I thought that she made, especially early on, were incredibly valid. And then sometimes the story just got, like, I'm not sure the story, like you said, was to back up the points, but then the story was just weird sometimes, like, and not backing up a point. I don't know.
Yeah. So like if you want like someone who focuses on the story but also happens to make libertarian points within it, Andrew Heaton wrote a book of short stories called Inappropriately Human. And it's kind of sci-fi stuff, but like there's a handful of like libertarian messages that are like woven throughout these stories without being like on the nose. So it's
I
less
like.
obvious. Like he's not going to go out and like in the middle to disrupt the story to stand on a soapbox for 30 pages to tell you about libertarian philosophy. It's going to be more subtle, but there's
And
some good
funny.
ones.
He's
Yeah,
funny.
it's funny.
Yeah, and that makes that kind of really that makes entertainment for me. That makes libertarian messaging more palatable. George Carlin, big libertarian. He was funny.
Yeah. All right. So we should get to our final segment. We'll go back at 46, and we'll talk about that Josh Hawley social media bill. Unless you
What a
want
good
to,
idea.
you got other stuff to talk about, but
Yeah, I've got a fake news for you.
all right. We'll get to a couple of those. So we're gonna go back in just a minute, and if anyone else has any other topics, make sure you leave them in the comments, and we'll try to get to them. All right, back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm still here, Kevin, and
Still
as
here.
always, enjoying the show. I think we got to talk about, like, here comes the nanny state. Here we go again. Or the government just cares about your kids. Which is it, Kevin?
Well, we got a nice bill
Yeah.
from the infamous Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. It's called the Mature Act because they love their dumb acronyms, don't they? They just
Oh my
love them.
God.
They cannot help themselves.
It hurts me. Can I read what the Mature Act, the acronym
What
stands
it
for?
stands for? Yeah, go for it.
Making age verification technology uniform, robust, and effective.
Dude, they were so proud of that one. You know it. Like they were just like in the room, like, yes, this is it.
I could
Like,
just see him high-fiving his buds when they came up with that. His team that crafted this legislation, and they're high-fiving each other. The Mature Act, and so the premise of the bill is that if you're under 16, you get to stay the heck right off of social media. Period.
yeah, no, you're not able to be on social media. Not just like something like you as parents can determine whether or not you want your kids on social media or how much, or like put limits on their interaction on social media. No. The government's going to come in and just say, nope, you are not allowed to be on social media if you're under 16. Full stop. And here's the thing. Here's what this is going to require, because you need to now show proof that you're old enough for social media. In order to show proof, you need to go get a government ID and upload that to social media sites. Now, effectively, there's no more anonymity in creating a social media account, because every single account, however they choose to define social media, needs to be tied to an ID that is acceptable under this law. If it
Kevin,
were
they're
to
doing
pass,
it
I
for
don't
the
think it is,
kids,
but
though, man. You don't even you libertarians don't care about kids. That's the problem.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, don't care about the kids at all. But I do care about online privacy and having to upload my ID for every single platform. Now, listen, I mentioned I do digital marketing. I sell Facebook ads for politicians, which means I have to upload my ID to Facebook. They upload my ID and they take my picture and they do a whole thing, mail something to my house. I've had to do that, but that's because I wanted to make money off of it. That's fine. But for your average user, you should not have to go through that just to interact with your friends online.
Regardless of your age, I have kids, right? I got teenagers. You're going to have a kid that's a teenager. There is a lot of garbage online. Like there's a lot of stuff that I don't want them exposed to, and so I can understand whether the instant thought is, oh my God, thank you, Josh Hawley, for empowering me to stick my nose into my kid's business, right? Isn't that I'm not saying
Right.
it's right, but can you understand where people would be like, oh wow, the conservatives that don't quite understand what conservatism is when it
No,
comes
right.
to the
Like
government,
they're no longer pretending to be the party of limited government. Like just
right?
completely thrown away that premise. And so I'm sure there are some parents out there who are like, yes, this was a pain to tell my kid to get off of TikTok, and now I don't have to. But sorry,
It-
bro. Like the government says you can't be on. Like it's not my rule. The
it's not
government.
my
Darn that government.
Oh, that Josh Hawley. I'm going to vote
Yeah.
for him again, kids, but it's really for your own good. It's for your own good.
Yeah. But we'll get to a couple of these comments. Brian Sutton says, sure glad they didn't do that with newspapers when I was a kid. Yeah, I mean it's a huge source of information. People are learning on all these social platforms, on TikTok, on Be Real, which is one of the newer ones, on Facebook, probably less so with people under 16, but on Twitter, wherever they are. Yeah, no, like it's a source of information, it's a source of social connection. It's probably also like, unless they end up really doing the government ID thing, like really difficult to enforce. Because right now, like I think it's illegal to get an email address if you're under 12. There's a federal law for this, but like that isn't well enforced. No one's out. No one's out actually stopping kids from getting an email address if they really want one at 10 years old. Like they can go and do it.
Other than literally making every single person that is on social media verify exactly who they are. What
That's what they want. That's how we stop the Russian trolls. That's what we're really getting at, Tim.
I still miss red flag news, Kevin. I like they quash that, and Alex Jones, like guys, like this is an injustice. We don't need more laws. We need less laws. We need less restrictions. Alex Jones needs a platform, Kevin.
Alex Jones needs a platform. I mean, isn't he on like Rumble or something?
I hope so.
Yeah, there's always going to be something else. It's always going to be out there. I feel like he's still doing his thing. Like
Maybe
he
I'll
didn't
go
really
back.
get stopped. Like, I mean, that's kind of like that. And then this is coming from the right too. Like social media companies suppressing voices. Like, well, yeah, I have some issues with that, but also like people find ways. Like until the government actually gets involved and like eliminates your ability to access these social media platforms, then yeah, that's First Amendment violation. We got to stop that.
We've talked about a lot of laws tonight, and so look, the Mature Act I can get where it might appeal to some people. The issue is that there's this law of unintended consequences that when we buy into virtue signals offered to us from a government, we literally get wrecked. We give up our freedom. They're promising us safety. They only deliver the abridgment of freedom. They don't ever deliver safety. This will automatically create some sort of black market for kids that get into age verification scams, and now they're really breaking the law. Like,
yeah, right. And then suddenly there's like kids who are going to jail because they're brokering fake ID services to get on the TikTok or whatever. And like and it sounds like I'm making a joke, but like also like there is a market for fake IDs for alcohol. Like it's been a thing.
It's been a thing.
Like it's like not even a black market that needs to develop. It's already here. It's already going on. And it'll just adapt to a new service that they can offer, which is offering IDs for social media access.
Fake digital IDs. The future is so bright and cheery. Kevin, I got a question for you. Like, I saw a news article. And I'm going to have to ask you, like, if it's real news or fake news. There was a couple in Ohio living in a storage space in Walmart. They set up a meth lab. They had a big screen TV. They were successful at this endeavor for over 2 years.
In a Walmart?
In a Walmart.
I mean, bold move setting up right in the middle of the store. I'm going to say it's real. I'm going to say they figured it out.
Unfortunately, Kevin, because I was like really happy. Like, this is a creative solution to the homeless problem, right? Like, sneak into a Walmart and make yourself some space. But unfortunately, it is in fact fake news. It never happened.
Yeah. I mean, like you always hear some of those stories, like like you kind of set up in between like two of those big towers and like hide in like the. There was like a movie where they were doing that, where they made like a break area in the middle of like a toilet paper wall or something like that.
Oh yeah, what? Yep, I remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what that movie. Maybe someone in the comments will remember what that is, but yeah, I imagine that Walmart's probably savvy enough to notice that after a while, particularly if they're making meth or something. Like that's
Yeah,
it's going to attract attention.
perhaps
I would assume. Like, I think there's going to be an odor
there
that
there
people would
there
eventually
would be.
notice.
So look, there's also like a lot of rage going on right now. There's all sorts of prostitution stings and arrests going on, and they're like catching like, oh, I just want your take on it. Like, I know what the perfect libertarian take is, but some they in Florida they broke up a human trafficking ring and they made
Mhm.
like 213 arrests. Um, but in Schenectady, a former longtime head of the Schenectady Office of General Services was arrested in a prostitution sting in Schenectady on Tuesday. Carl Olson, who served the city from 1991 until leaving in 2014. Look, this guy's 63 years old. He's charged with patronizing a prostitute in the third degree, a class A misdemeanor. What's I get making fun of a former official, government official, but what what did this guy do wrong?
Yeah, nothing as long as it was consensual, right? Like it's that to me, like yeah, morally, like there's you know you can have your own like values around that if you want to, but like should there be any like legal prohibition on consensual activity between adults? No, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
So I mentioned the Florida gig because it was a human trafficking ring where they were bringing people in from other countries and forcing them into this behavior, not necessarily through free will, but as
Mhm.
a way to recover their debt that they purportedly owed for getting smuggled into the country. And I think that there's
Right.
a stark contrast there, right? Even from a libertarian perspective, this was not consensual by these people that were involved in the ring.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like that's definitely a different situation. And when you look at situations like that, and I don't know much about this specific situation, but like I've read stories about stuff like that before, and it'll go like someone will smuggle you into the country, and then suddenly like you don't have any paperwork, you don't have any recourse, you don't have any money, and they kind of strong arm you into like prostitution, right? So it's not kind of starting to lose consent there, and then you know you've engaged in a crime now, and they threaten to turn you in if you say anything or you speak up about abusive practices. And so that's where you end up with these awful situations. But when you look at what the root of that is, right? Like, okay, so why were they able to extort those folks in the first place? Well, because like we have a system where you can't easily and legally enter the country, so they made a desperate move to come over here. And
Hmm.
then they could be punished and deported and possibly sent back to a dangerous or life-threatening situation in another country if they report their abusers to the authorities. And then on top of that, they're further coerced into continuing an activity they don't want to do, maybe, by threatening them with the legal consequences of prostitution. Okay. If both of those things were legal, if the government wasn't involved in that situation at like kind of both ends of it, the lives of the people who are the victims of the human trafficking would be better off.
I you hit it perfectly. You literally knocked it out of the park. That's a real discussion where the government creates a black market, puts young women in abusive relationships with no recourse to escape that. They can't call the cops and say, hey, these guys are abusing me and forcing me to do these guys or girls or whatever the ring is. I don't want to be
Yeah.
sexist. But they can't appeal to an official to protect them. I don't know, man. I think it's a perfect like synopsis of how the government creates a bad situation and then only when trying to somewhat correct it only makes it even worse.
Yeah. And so like the government coming in to like fix this situation ends up being like, oh, see, look, we broke up this human trafficking ring, but it's kind of typical example of like, well, the government broke your legs, now they're offering a crutch, right?
Yeah.
And some of the damage is already done for some of these folks, and oftentimes there isn't any like support or recourse for the people who are victims of human trafficking. Sometimes they end up getting deported anyway,
Yeah.
and which is an awful situation. So there's a better way to approach it though, which is just like, hey, like regardless of what your individual moral feelings are on that activity, the government probably shouldn't be using violence in this situation.
Which they have a monopoly on violence, and you get thrown in a cage if you misbehave. So that's a real problem, right? But then I want to go to the other part that always
We're
concerns
we're gonna have to save it for the post show, Tim, because we have only a minute left, and so
WYSL listeners are going to love this one though. About our discussion about prostitution, guys. It's real. I hope you appreciate it. Engage with us because we want to have the conversation. We're more than willing to have the conversation with you guys. We really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, so we'll talk about Tim's going to keep talking about this after break. So again, if you're listening to WYSL, make sure you look up the podcast, look up a Free Solution anywhere you find podcasts. We also do this online, Free Solution Facebook page, YouTube channel, Kevin Wilson pages, Tim O'Connor pages, all those places where we do these lives, usually on Tuesday night. We're doing this one on a Thursday. But thanks for joining us. If you're listening on WYSL, have a wonderful night, folks listening on the radio. All right. Oh, good. All right. Yeah. So now you can keep going, Tim, if you so choose.
Yeah. So I wanted to leave the radio viewers like hanging a little bit there, and on in a note where they're kind of like, are these guys crazy? Like the cops are the moral police. So we didn't quite get to where I wanted to say a 62-year-old guy soliciting a prostitute getting charged with a misdemeanor, a 75-year-old guy, like. As long as it's an agreement, I don't get the right of the government to. And look, I'm not suggesting that we should all go out and solicit each other with money for sex. Like that's not the issue, right? But
good
people get in
clarification.
uncomfortable, awkward situations that this is a good deal for them, you know?
Yeah. So if that's again, as long as everyone's consenting to that, that's what they want to do, then okay, like whatever. Again, if I don't know if he's like married or anything and there's a problem there, like, okay, well, even if that's the case, that's an issue between that person and their spouse. All right. Like they're gonna have to work that out. Not the government's business.
I do like a government official kind of getting busted at it, but like that's only because they made a lot of money off of us making bad decisions. That's not because like I actually think he engaged in this horrible moral turpitude kind of crime and that the government should be enforcing that. And look, who knows what his circumstances are. So I'm a very forgiving guy, even of whatever his personal life is now. That's fine,
Yeah.
So front page stuff.
Yeah. John Thuman bring up Robert Kraft. Yeah, again, I don't remember exactly details of that. It kind of seemed like it was like, a weird like massage parlor type of thing where they were running it, that kind of side business there. And that to me, again, as long as everyone was consenting, there wasn't a coercive situation with like the employees. And like, again, to me, like, I don't care, which differs from, if we're going to go with like the football thing from like what Deshaun Watson was accused of, which is like, not consensual. Like the people were thinking that they were just giving a massage and doing, like legitimate work in that area. And then suddenly like he's soliciting them for sex and they did not want to do that.
Yeah, that's awkward.
Allegedly, right? Like that's what the accusation is anyway, from, was it like 20 women or something? I think more. So again, those are different situations, right? Like that's what you revoke consent, then suddenly like, and you start to enter the realm of like coercive activity, then suddenly you get into the realm of where there's like legitimate case for government intervention in that situation.
Right, which in right, and then that brings us full circle back to a human trafficking situation where in a massage parlor you could see where perhaps that might be a place where people end up human trafficked, I guess.
Yeah, it could be again. Like
Right.
so some of these get weird. And there's some good coverage on like Reason about this, where like Elizabeth Nolan Brown writes about it, which sometimes it's the case where like the people involved like have a lot of incentive to say that they're victims of human trafficking, so it gets a bit muddy. Like because sometimes they
Right.
might be, but like also like they're less likely to face legal consequences if they say they were. And again, that set of perverse incentive ends up muddying the waters of cases where there is legitimate coercion happening. Um, and if you just had, legal sex work, it wouldn't
It
be.
would be taken care of, right? We could straighten this situation out where predatory behavior would be eliminated, or at the very least properly punished, okay? Because we're not getting that now. Like, predators can still avail themselves of situations
Yeah.
that benefit them, and so that's a reality, guys. Some of our libertarian ideas actually offer cleaner, brighter lines for our human existence, and I don't know why more people don't just pick them up and say, yeah, these guys are great.
Would be nice, but no, it's not going to happen. I know. The one time I talked about like this issue live on air on WS, it was a candidate for Senate, by the way. I'm trying to remember what his name was now, but um, uh, he a libertarian advocate of sex work asked the question of like, hey, what do you think of like legalizing prostitution? And I think he was a little bit flustered by the question. Like he
Well,
forgot for a moment he was on a libertarian show, and that sort of thing can get asked.
he didn't even know. Like, it broadsided, caught him broadsided. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So like if he eventually, he said something like, I want to be legal. I wouldn't, want that to happen to my daughters or whatever. But like yeah. But
Okay,
I
yeah,
think he was
well,
like, what did I get myself into by agreeing to this interview with a libertarian? Like I thought I was like a conservative station. What happened?
yeah, the Democrats would be like, yeah, legalize it so we can charge more taxes and grow the government. And Republicans would be like, no, we don't want to legalize it because it's a morality crime, and
Yeah.
it empowers our police department to punish people, turn people into victims, and fills jails. Like, I don't know, some of that
Yeah.
stuff doesn't quite um, make sense to me.
No, and let's get to this question too. So if sex work is made legal, wouldn't it be the government function to do testing? It maybe not. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be. Like it certainly might, because government wants to get involved somehow, and in some European countries that's what they do. But there could be other certifications, other ways of verification. The government doesn't have to be more involved. They might anyway, but it doesn't
Right.
have to be. And listen, I'm not going to claim to be like an expert on this, other than the fact that like, hey, I don't think the government should be using violence in this situation where consensual people are doing stuff, right? Like, and it's not a statement about the morality of those individual circumstances, but
Right.
because that's all depends on like what your situation is, but whatever, right? Like it's all laws must be moral, not all morals must be laws. Brian Sutton on Facebook. Yeah,
I like that. I like that.
that's fair.
It's kind of a witty profundity.
Yeah, I like that. I remember getting into debate one time about a friend who was kind of against marijuana legalization, in part because he felt that it was immoral. It's like, so if it's immoral, then we ought to make a law against it. Why should anyone be able to engage in an activity that is harmful in his mind to themselves and to others and not be punished for it? And so that is a level of thinking that a lot of people see as the legitimate role of government. Obviously, that not us too, but
No,
that is
no.
something that people do see. But there are things all the time that, like, you can, in many situations, it's not like necessarily illegal to lie, but there's some situations where it is. But telling a lie to your kids about something isn't illegal in most cases. It's maybe immoral, maybe justified in the circumstances. You don't know, right? Like, and
It
it's
always
not the,
brings
the
up
role of
Santa
the government
Claus.
to determine that, right?
Yeah, it
Whatever
always
the thing
brings up.
is.
Yeah, I believed in Santa Claus until I was like 5, right? Like, the doubts started creeping in, and you know, it's like, and the thing was with me, because I do have this, I want to be consistent as a human being. I would never have lied to my kids if they asked me if Santa Claus was real, right? I just allowed them to believe that Santa Claus was real. I did want to talk about that. That's why I put it up there. What do you think?
This question from libertarians. But oh, well, let me get to this one first. Cops can lie to get you to confess, Patricia, on YouTube. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you don't know, cops can lie to you. They have no obligation to tell you the truth. They can lie to you all they want to get you to admit to doing crimes. So remember that, and probably I said to quote who are those lawyers who are on social media? Oh, man, I'm gonna forget their
They had
name
that
now.
the guy from Hill Street Blues or whatever on there.
Yeah,
with him,
but
right?
they always have like short videos and like, I remember when cops talk to you, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, that guy,
Excuse my
Michael
language.
Hasty, something.
Yeah, but
It's a good
yeah,
video, man. You guys, shut the fuck up. Just when the cop asks you a question, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And then call us.
Yep, exactly.
The much ballyhooed discussion about what is the correct age of consent. Libertarians get much maligned over this issue because some libertarians want to make bold statements that offend society.
Right.
I'm comfortable with discussing ages of 16 for certain rights and responsibilities. And after they move out of my house, their consent is theirs. Till they move out of my house, our consent is ours, right? So they have rules that they have to live by. I'm not this like, I don't know where you are going to come down on this,
Yeah.
but I'm okay with where we're at as a society. I don't feel like I don't even want to lower the voting ages because like kids are dumb, man. No offense, but I've raised a few. They're dumb as heck. They're dumb as rocks.
Well, it's kind of true. I mean, there are also 30-year-olds who are very dumb.
I was going to go with 40 when I first saw it.
40,
like,
you know,
40.
whichever.
Because I'm 56, that puts me safely in the age of consent.
That's fine. Well, it's not good for me, but you know.
Yeah.
But no, again to answer Patricia on YouTube's like question, how old do you need to be to consent according to libertarians? It depends. Some folks are they would give you an uncomfortably low answer or say that like there shouldn't be government involvement here, but I kind of agree with you, Tim. Like it's I'm fine with like the consensus that we have like legally and culturally now of like 17, 18ish.
And depending on what you're asking me about what they're consenting to, right? Like,
right. I mean, like, because there are some like moneyness with like new laws coming out. Like, well, can a 13-year-old consent to getting a vaccine without parents' permission? Right. Like that's a type of consent. You know, like usually when people imply this with this question, they imply like age of consent for sex. But there are other like things about consent, like when can you sign a contract, when can you get make a medical decision about yourself, other stuff too.
Where'd it go?
Yeah, I think
another one about Tim. But if kids work and pay taxes, why can't they vote? So are they paying all their own bills, or are they? I don't know. You know, like I think we could hash this out. We could argue it. I could be persuaded a little bit here and there. I'm concerned about emotional responses that cause votes when people are not being thoughtful. And I think that my position here is that at 16, you can be persuaded by an emotional argument, whereas 18 to 20, and as you get older, like being persuaded by emotional arguments becomes, well,
people. Yeah.
I'm already losing the argument myself, Patty, so I don't know. How's that?
I mean, like it, unpopular opinion, and I know like why historically we don't do this, but I still think like everyone should just have to take the citizenship test to be able to vote.
Wow,
I know
not libertarian at all.
No, it isn't. Like I know historically why we don't do that. Like I understand that. Don't come at me, but like there are so many people who have no idea how government works. Like just straight up, like no idea. There's 3 branches. Like I've talked to folks. I ran for Congress, talked to some voters who are like, I'm voting for this person because of this. I'm like, but they're not even running in that race, man. Like, stop.
Oh God,
I'm voting for Donald Trump for Congress. What?
You
What?
can't like.
I'm voting for Obama. Like, he can't even run again. Stop.
Hello. Yeah, no. I actually, if we could popularize that notion amongst other libertarians, I would be comfortable with saying, look, pass the citizenship test, 16, 14. Okay, maybe
Yeah,
we
like
could talk.
again,
But
like to be like, yeah, okay, yeah, you want to take that at 14 and you understand like how government functions and like you can pass that test, like great. Like that's fine.
and then is taxation theft? And their answer right there
There we go.
would count. That would be the
That's
final decider.
it's the price we pay for well, a civilized society.
Yeah, the price. If yeah, give them a list of A, B, C, or D. Taxation is the price we pay for a civilized society to fund necessary foreign wars and interventions to protect people all over the globe. Theft. And remember,
Yeah.
kids, the answer is always C when in doubt.
Yeah, there you go. But you know, and listen, I know some folks like they're not gonna to know they're not gonna know and understand like how government works. And then I see Trisha on YouTube said until 12 years ago I had no clue and educated myself on government. Yeah, man, like I'm not a proponent of like everyone should vote all the time in elections no matter what. Like I'm a big proponent of like if you have no idea what's going on, you should probably stay home. Like I'm not a like go vote no matter what. Like understand what you're voting for. Like I know there's some like, oh yeah, it's great if we get more people to vote. I'm like, not necessarily. Not if they're making dumb, uninformed decisions. Like if you're making an informed decision, I disagree with it. Like, okay, fine, but like
That's
make an
one
informed
thing.
decision.
Yeah, but you're just because
people are
that
like,
guy.
I had someone calling on the radio show on when like the election day when I was running for Congress, like, oh yeah, I voted row B all the way, so I voted for you. I'm like, I wasn't on row B, bro. Like,
But thanks.
that's row F. Thanks. Yeah, cool.
That's awful.
Yeah.
It's hilarious though.
So I mean that's what it is, and I see stuff like that, and I'm like, all right, like, what? Maybe everyone voting was a mistake. No, I won't go that far. Like, I'm generally like in favor of Democratic Republics. I get frustrated with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I know we've kind of veered from like the original topic, but that's fine.
We were freelancing our conversation, Kevin.
That's right.
Remember, bro, freelance isn't free.
Freelance isn't free. Well, on that note, we should call it a night.
We should, because that was a horrible joke, and we gotta go.
There we go. No, and on that note, there. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Patricia, John, Brian, all the folks commenting. Thanks for making the show interesting and asking questions that send us down tangents.
Yeah, honestly, that's my specialty. I love that.
Yeah. So it was a good time. All right. So thanks again for joining us. Have a wonderful night, folks. Take care.